President Obama laying out his plan to fight terrorism in an op-ed today for the Los Angeles Times, writing that it is a battle for hearts and minds and cannot be won by military force alone. It's a point that the president is surely going to try to drive home this afternoon when he'll be speaking at his summit on countering violent extremism. Where do we stand in this battle? What's it going to take to win? Congressman Schiff joins me now, the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, thanks very much. There's been a lot of criticism, a lot of pushback against the administration for the way it is laying out this summit, pointing out that it's not focusing enough on what is really happening in the field on ISIS, trying perhaps too hard to avoid identifying this as only Islamic extremism, trying to look so broadly that it is missing the point.
You know, I hear this argument made over and over again, but I don't find it very compelling. What the president is trying to do is not frame this as a war on Islam. If that's the way people perceive this, I think it would have disastrous consequences. So yes, he needs to talk about and is talking about how some would pervert the faith of Islam. But this isn't a fight between religions or Western civilization in Islam. And I think that's a point that he really has underscore. So I understand people are piling on the president about this, but frankly, I don't think that argument is very weighty.
Although here he has the summit, no heads of government coming. The participation has not been at a particularly high level. We will have some foreign ministers. We'll be speaking to the Egyptian foreign minister shortly, who's going to be participating. But there hasn't been a whole lot of support from either Europe or the Middle East at a very high level for what the president is setting out here. It seems to be more of a dog and pony show.
Well, I think it's very important in terms of what we're doing here at home and that we coordinate our efforts with our European and other allies. We have been fortunate in not having many attacks here in the United States. I think it's in part because our Muslim communities are better integrated. We have a better level of cooperation between our community-based policing and the community and religious organizations. That's something that I think Europe can profit from, those experiences, and I think we also need to work on our intelligence sharing with Europe and our other allies. So I think it's an important summit. I can't speak to why we didn't have other participation, but I think it's a very important undertaking.
What about the communities, some of the communities' concerns that community involvement, Homeland Security involvement, is really surveillance? I mean, we have to reassure them about their privacy and also that this is not just intelligence gathering, that this is a sincere effort to deal with their concerns.
Well, that's absolutely right, and that concern is very prevalent where I come from in Los Angeles, where some of the Muslim community are concerned that this is just an invitation to greater surveillance. And obviously there's a deficit of trust that has to be rebuilt. This has to be a partnership, not a let's get close so I can keep an eye on you. But in fact, I think in many parts of the country there are very good relationships, and I think that will be true in Los Angeles, and that's developing in Los Angeles. And it's really going to be key to avoiding the kind of homegrown radicalism that we're seeing around the world.
Keir Simmons referred to trying to identify who this horrible executioner is. An Americanized accent, speaking American accented or North American accented English, possibly Canadian. Any way that we have so far to identify who this person is?
I can't speak to what efforts we've made thus far to identify the person in this gruesome video, but you know, his accent probably underscores the fact that you know, from the United States we've had a great many people join the fight, from the European countries, many thousands of foreign fighters. We're just looking at one person in a video. As gruesome as that person is, probably the greater threat are those that have not been identified or can't be identified because they don't appear in a video, and they can come back home with a greater degree of anonymity. So we've got a lot on our plate to try to guard against. Should
we be selling drones to some of these allies? Today's ally may not be tomorrow's.
Well, that's very true, and I think we have to be extremely cautious about it. And it's one of the reasons why what example we set in terms of the efforts that we make to avoid civilian casualties. The requirements have to be met before we utilize a drone and lethal force. We have to set the bar very high because others may not. But it also means that we have to be very careful about anyone we might sell that technology to.
And finally, on the war powers debate coming up, there seems to be a lot of division between those in both camps. Those who say that the president should be somewhat restrained, should not have a blank check, and others who say that the president should not be giving up powers, that he's the commander-in-chief. Where do you come down?
Well, I come down much more on the side of let's learn from the mistakes we've made. We've had two very broad authorizations that are continuing on in force many, many years after they were written, and to fight a foe that didn't even exist at the time. We don't want to repeat that. I think Congress wants to have an aggressive role in the checks and balances that the Founding Fathers had in mind. We can't do that if we write another blank check that doesn't have geographic limits or time limits or limits on the use of ground. So I come down in favor of a very narrowly tailored authorization.
Adam Schiff, the top Democrat on House Intelligence. Thank you, as always.